and welcome back to the Stitch Sessions and another Christmas crochet tutorial. Now this actually doesn't necessarily have to be for Christmas, but you know, I always think of cozy slippers and I think of wintertime and the holidays. So in this week's project, we are going to make these really cute snuggly crochet slippers. And they're super quick to make, so you still have time to make a pair or two as an add-on gift for that someone special. And what I love about these types of gifts is they're handmade and they're made from the heart. So in this project, we are going to be diving into the crunch stitch. Now, those of you that saw my Holly Jolly holiday scarf, I talked a lot about how that stitch pattern was a kind of variation on the crunch stitch. Well, this is actually using the full-on crunch stitch. So you'll get a chance to see how it's worked and how the texture just works up so beautifully. And we're gonna add a little bit of this fun fur trim, just makes it extra cozy. Now in this tutorial, I'm just making the slipper. I do have a previous tutorial where I also fastened on a non-slip bottom to that slipper. So a lot of times with crochet slippers, they can be a little bit on the slippery side on hardwood or tile. So I will leave a link for that tutorial in the description box down below for those of you that want to add the non-slip sole to the bottom. But this is going to be super quick and tons of fun. So let's just get all our materials together and let's get stitching up our snuggly slippers. Okay, let's dive into the materials we need for our slippers. So for this project, I used this yarn by Loops and Threads. It's called Ring Spun. I've used it before for a few other projects, and you may remember that I said it was actually gifted to me. I have not seen this recently in the stores. I believe it was a Michaels exclusive. And but it is 55% acrylic and 45% cotton. It's a medium weight 4, so you can use any yarn that you like in a medium 4 blend, or you could use a bulky yarn if you like as well. So that would be really nice for slippers. In case you're wondering, the color is called magenta. In case you happen to be able to find this exact yarn somewhere, it comes in a ball of 159 yards or 145 meters. And I'm not sure what it's 100 grams. There we go. So one ball or 100 grams should be plenty for a pair. Now, if you choose to line your opening with a little bit of fur, which I'm going to do, fur yarn, the yarn I used is also by Loops and Threads, and it was simply called Fur. Now, I picked this up last year, but you know, with the holiday season, everything, there's tons of fur yarn out there. So again, any fur yarn will do. And in case you're wondering about this particular color, it is called Soft Pink number 213. And I just thought it would work perfectly with that color. And you're just going to need a bit of this. So that's the yarn I'm using. And the hook size I'm using for this project is a 6mm hook, which is also known as a size J or a 10. As always, you will need to make sure that you have a pair of scissors on hand and a trusty darning needle to sew in any ends at the end. So let's begin. Okay, so what we're going to do is essentially the slipper is created from one rectangle, and I've got the first one made here, and as you can see, it's got this great texture to it. And so it's actually just a rectangle, which is really what makes this super fun and extremely easy to do, even though it looks kind of complicated if you're a little bit newer. So the idea is that we're going to form a chain, and you want to make sure that that chain will wrap nicely around your foot there, or the foot that you are working on. A great way to do it if you're making this for someone else is maybe grab a slipper that they already own. I wouldn't recommend a shoe because then it's going to be too loose as a slipper. And in fact, this is fairly loose on me. And there's going to be some stretch, right? Some stretch, a little bit of give. So I would use a pair of slippers they already own, or even a pair of socks would not be a bad idea if you don't have the foot that you are going to make it for. So what we're going to do first is you're going to begin by placing a slip knot on your hook. Just like that. Oops. There we go. And so you're going to chain up the number of chains it's going to take you to wrap that chain comfortably around the foot, around the circumference of the foot. What you want to be aware of is you want to make sure it's an even number of chains. Okay, so I chained 34 for my slipper. So that's what I'm going to do here. I'm going to chain up 34 chains. Okay, once you have the number of chains that you require, you can have something that looks like that. Just double check. So for me, I have the other slipper that I already did this with. So again, I'm just going to double check, and that fits pretty loosely around there. Okay, if you have the foot handy, you want to actually it to be a little snug, because like I said, it will stretch over time, over usage. So you want to make it snug, not tight, but just nicely form-fitting. So I have my 34 chains, and now we're going to begin our stitch pattern. So this is a single row repeat. That means once you finish this row, we're going to keep repeating it for subsequent rows. So we are going to do the crunch stitch, which is such a fun stitch to do because it just creates this really cool texture. So what you're going to do first is you're going to find the second chain from the hook. Remember, we never count the one on the hook. So you count 1 and 2. Into that chain, you are going to slip stitch. Now be careful that you don't slip stitch too tightly, because we will need to work into that stitch again. Okay, so the next stitch, what we're going to do is we're going to place a half double crochet stitch. So you're going to yarn over, insert your hook, and then pull up a loop. You'll have 3 loops on your hook. You're going to yarn over and pull through all 3. Okay, and now into the next stitch, you are going to slip stitch. Nice and relaxed. And then into the next stitch, you're going to do a half double crochet. And I think you can see this is going to be the repeat for this row. So into the next row, you're going to slip stitch. Okay, and into the following row, you're going to do a half double crochet. Into the next stitch, you're going to slip stitch. Then you will half double crochet into the next stitch. So you're going to continuously alternate slip stitch and half double crochet, slip stitch and half double crochet. And that is what you're going to alter all the way down to the end of your chain. And into the very last chain, you will have a half double crochet. So once you've completed row 1, I'll meet up with you there, and you will end up having a total of 32 stitches. So remember, we started working into the second chain from the hook. So go ahead and finish row 1, and I'll meet up with you in a bit. Once you've completed row 1, your row is going to look like this. When you turn it over, that's when you can really see that little texture coming through, okay? And that's what creates this cute little cushy texture on the outside. So now those of you that have worked the crunch stitch before, you may know that a lot of people will do a return row, which is usually a row of single crochet stitches to then come back around and then repeat this stitch. And what that does is it keeps all of the texture on one side only, so there's a right side and a wrong side. For this project, I am not using a return row, therefore it makes the fabric reversible. So whatever you see on this side looks exactly the same on that side. So if you decide to use this stitch for other projects, it's a great way to make it reversible. So what we're going to do, how you're going to begin row 2 in every round after this, once you finish your row, you're going to chain 1 and turn your work. And you're going to begin the exact same way. You're going to go right into the very first stitch here, and you're going to slip stitch. So now currently you're slip stitching on top of a half double crochet. Into the next stitch, you are going to half double crochet, and that is where there was a slip stitch. So you can see what's happening here. We're alternating where the stitches sit, and that's what creates that beautiful texture. So then we slip stitch in the next, and half double crochet in the next. Okay, so when you're half double crocheting into the stitch, that's usually the slip stitch, and that's why it's so important when you do slip stitches, you don't want to do them too tightly. So you get the picture now, right? 1 slip stitch, 1 half double crochet. So you always begin a row with a chain 1 and a slip stitch, and you always end it with a half double crochet. Then you chain 1, turn your work, and repeat. So after you've done this a couple of times, you can see the texture is just starting to come through a little wee bit. So I'm going to set you off. That is basically it. I told you guys this was a super, super easy slipper project. So you're going to now repeat this for the total of rows you need until you reach the length of the foot. So remember, we wrap the chain around the foot. So we are basically creating our swatch from the toe all the way to the heel, or from the heel all the way to the toe. So for me, that was 40 rows. I'm generally a size 7 to a size 8, depending on the shoe. So again, easiest way to do it is just, when you've done a good amount of rows, like even if you want to start measuring at around row 35 or 36, then just make sure the person can set their foot and that it leaves a little bit at the tip of the toe, but that their heel can fit right to the end of it, okay? And again, you're always better to end up making it a little bit larger because again, through washing and wear, it'll stretch, but it'll also shrink. That's it, guys. This is where I set you loose. You press pause, put on a couple little shows. You'll be done this in no time. It's a super, super quick project. So I'm going to go ahead and finish my 40 rows. And then I'm going to meet up with you guys to talk about how we're actually going to construct our fabric and shape it into a slipper. And then we'll be ready to put on the final touch. Okay, I have completed my 40 rows. Oops. So you can see the texture it creates is just fabulous. So what you do is you place your foot here and make sure the slipper can close comfortably over your feet, okay? And make sure that your heel, this part is able to close behind your heel. And you want to have a little bit of space between your toes and the edge there, okay? And by the way, for me, just measuring here, this measured a length of 10 inches, which is also approximately 25 centimeters in length. And if you are wondering, the width is just under 9 inches, which is about 22 centimeters, okay? So that is basically a rectangle. So what you want to do now is just leave a long tail about 12 inches or so, and you're going to snip off your yarn. You want to thread your darning needle here, your yarn needle, and have that ready. And then what we're going to do is we are going to fold this in 3 sections. And you want to focus on the end that has the tail. You want to make them relatively even, and you'll be able to tell if they are or not. So you want to do a little tri-fold here. Okay, and all we have to worry about is this end. So you can see here, fairly even. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to sew this end here so that it secures this fold in place. So I'm just going to insert my hook and bring it up through there, just like that, and maybe go in there to create a little bit of a knot. There we go. Now it's nice and secure. So this is actually going to be the toe part of your slipper. So what we're going to do now that you've secured that, is you want to weave this back and forth, forward. We're not exactly going to do a whip stitch. We're going to do, I think, what they call the mattress stitch. So you're going to weave it forward and then you're going to weave it back in. And you want to catch all 3 of those edges. So you have the back edge, the middle, and the front. Now, this doesn't have to be perfect. If you don't catch every single stitch going across, it's not a big deal, just as long as you catch each section. So you always just want to think front, middle, back, like that. And then you're going to go back, middle, and front. Okay, and I'm not being too particular about it. I'm just making my way across. And I'll show you why in a second, why it's not that big of a deal to catch every single one perfectly. You want to catch the majority of the stitches, but okay, and then coming up to the end, I'm going to do it one more time. Back, middle, and front. Okay, once I've made my way across, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to cinch this together. So I'm going to pull just like that. See how it's coming closely together? Okay. Now you want to be careful that you don't pull so hard that you break your yarn, but you want to cinch it somewhat together. It does not have to be perfect. Okay. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to reach across to the furthest end there, and I'm just going to put my darning needle through, and that just solidifies that it'll zip right in just like that. Okay. Then I'm just going to do a couple little stitches back and forth just to secure it. Okay. And just like that. Okay. So what you've done is you've cinched in the toe portion of your slipper. Now, ideally what we're doing is we're working on the inside of the slipper. So this would technically be the wrong side. It doesn't really matter which side you use because it's a reversible fabric. Okay. So I'm not going to snip this off, but I'm just going to turn this right side out so you can see. Just creates that cute little rounded toe effect. Okay. And that's why you wanted to have a little bit of a gap where your toes are. Now you might be thinking that looks like a short slipper. Do not worry, because we are now going to whip that in. Now what you want to do is you want to turn it back out again. You want to leave this tail for now. We're going to come back to it in a moment. Once you've knotted a few times, you feel comfortable with it, you're going to leave this tail. Now we're going to sew up the back seam. Okay, and this is the part where your foot's going to sit in. So is it starting to look like a slipper now? Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to snip off another piece of yarn. And again, it just has to be about 12 inches or so. Okay, and you are going to thread your yarn needle just like that. And we want to bring the edge together. So you can see where that tail is there. You want to bring your edge together, and it doesn't really matter. You can start from the bottom, work your way up, and then knot these two together, or go from up to down. It doesn't really matter. I'm going to start from up to down just because it makes it a lot easier to see. So I'm going to start with that very first stitch there. I'm going to meet across the way, and that one's waiting for me right there. Now remember, this is our foundation chain row. So we're going to be working into chains technically, but they should be fairly easy to see. So I'm going to insert my hook and pull up my yarn. Whoops. I'm going to pull it up and make a knot here. Okay. And a lot of times I also like to knot it to the tail. And what that does, the tail of the original work, and for me that just makes it feel a little bit more secure. There we go. Now I know it's not going anywhere. And if I can, I try and sew over that. So here we are going to use a whip stitch. You can still use a mattress stitch if you like, but the whip stitch leaves the seam a lot smoother. Okay, so I'm just going to pick up a stitch from the back and then match it to the corresponding stitch in the front. Now, I do want them to make sure that they match up. I am going to go into every single stitch all the way across, okay? So then I go into the very next one there, and then I find the next one in front, just like that, and whip stitch. If you find it distracting with the tails, you can always weave in your tails at the end. I like to try and do them as I go. So into the very next stitch right there, and then I find the corresponding stitch right there. You get the picture. Fairly simple whip stitch technique, okay? Do it one more time, next stitch, corresponding stitch, and there we go. So you can see it's now being sewn together. So that's what you're gonna do all the way down the heel. And when you're done that, I'm gonna talk about how we're going to seal up the rest of the top portion of our slipper. Okay, I'm just down to the end here and I've gotten to the very last little stitch. And all I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna knot it a few times, create a knot. And then we'll be done sewing in our side here. And then I'm just gonna hide that tail by weaving it back in through there, just like that. And I'm gonna snip off any excess. And our heel is complete. So now you can see that the slipper has some structure. So this is the heel portion, and that's the toe. Now what we want to do is we want to close up this gap a wee bit, and this is where you want to try on the slipper if you can. If you can, it's not a big deal, but you can kind of gauge where it would be a comfortable opening. And so what we're going to do now with the tail that's still left over, remember this is all still wrong side facing out, is we are going to just lightly whip stitch across until we get up to where the ankle would be. And you can see that it's naturally forming there. So if you want, you can actually put a little pin here just to remind you of where to stop. Okay, so I just grabbed a few safety pins here, or you can use dress pins if you like. So I want to see how it's sitting and where the ankle is gonna sit. So that looks pretty good. So right away, I'm gonna pin my final destination, I call it. So that way I know where the opening is. Okay, just like that. And now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna sew the rest up through here. So now I have a little bit of structure. If it helps you, I would maybe put one more pin around the center because this still will shift a little bit. And so we want to make sure that this guy doesn't go anywhere. Just like that. Okay, so I'm just going to start right where my yarn left off, and I'm just going to lightly whip stitch as I go. Okay, just like that. And I'm just going from the front to the back. I'm just trying to pick up a few loops. I'm trying not to go all the way through. Even though this is the same color yarn and it'll probably just blend in nicely, I still just want to keep these mostly on surface stitches. Okay, so you're just making your way all the way up until you've reached the opening that you like. Okay, once you're done that, I'm going to meet up with you here. We're going to turn our work inside or right side out, and we've just got a couple more finishing touches and your slipper is almost done. Okay, I'm just coming up to the end here. Okay, so I'm just doing a couple little knots here at the end, and I am done sewing up my opening, just like that. And then you can either snip off your yarn or just try and weave in your tail to hide it, which sometimes I like to do. And now I'm just going to snip off the excess. And your basic structure is complete. So now what we're going to do is we're going to turn this right side out. So that way all of our seams are facing inward. Okay. So make sure to punch out that toe there, just like that. So we've got our heel. See how it naturally forms on its own? All of this from a rectangle. Isn't that cool? Now, what you're going to notice is you're still going to have a little flap here, right? Because we sewed it from the inside. So what you want to do now is you just want to lightly whip stitch this up here as well. Now, some people might actually put buttons here to make it look really neat, like it looks like it's a closure. So you can really get creative with this. I'm just going to keep it very simple, and I'm going to just sew it as well, just like I did with the other one. So I'm going to snip my yarn and do the exact same thing I did on the other side. Then you'll really fortify that. So go ahead and do that. And then the final touch is our lining around the opening, and you're almost there. Okay, so I've done all of my sewing, and technically my slipper is done. So if you wanted to just leave it like this, you can. I am going to add a little fur embellishment. So we're going to have something that looks like this. And so just to add a little bit of coziness, I thought it looked really cute with a little bit of this fur trim here. And I think it just adds that perfect cozy winter slipper look. So this is going to be nice and easy. I'm going to take you through it. This is where we're going to need our fur yarn. Okay, so we're not going to need much. So you just want to pull out a little bit to get ready to go here. And you're going to grab your hook. And so what we're going to do is I'm going to start actually right at the opening here. And I'm doing that on purpose because I want to come back and then dip down a little bit further in just to create this little extra bit in the design, just because I felt like it just added something to the top of the slipper. So all you're going to do is you're going to find a spot where you want to insert your hook. So at this point now, we are going to be working into the sides of stitches. So just find a spot where you're going to fit your hook in comfortably. And from there, you're going to hook that yarn and pull it through, and then chain one. Now this is a reason why I generally don't create full projects with this type of yarn. It's very difficult to see the stitches. So if you're a little bit newer, using this for trim is great. But once you have to use it for working subsequent rows, I mean, you'll get really good at feeling your way through the stitch, but it's very, very hard to see your stitches. So I know it looks and feels amazing in the store. If you're a bit newer, I would say, you know, buy it once, give it a shot, create like a scarf or something and see how it goes. Because more often than not, it becomes more frustrating than anything else. But for trim, these are perfect. Slippers, stockings, hats, that kind of thing. All right, so we've done our chain one, and now all we're gonna do is single crochets all the way around. So I'm just gonna find the next available space right next to it. I'm gonna weave that tail in. And I'm just going to pull up a loop and single crochet. Okay, and then pull it through. Now I don't want it to be tight, of course, because I want this to be nice and fuzzy. So I'm going to go into the next little area here. Now because we're just doing a round of trim and it's very furry, it's not, we don't have to be too precious about being exactly in the next stitch area. So I'm going to choose this next spot here and pull up a loop and then single crochet. So you see how like your stitches actually get lost in the fur? It's really meant for trim projects. But anyhow, you give it a shot and let me know what you think. Some people have no issues with it. All right, so again, I'm going into the next space. If you dip down a little lower, it's not a big deal. But you want to keep it fairly consistent, right? Like you don't want to be going down and back up and down and back up. So you can see it's going to give you a nice, beautiful trim. So that's all you're going to keep doing now. Finding a nice spot, insert, pull up, and single crochet. Nice spot there, single crochet. So you're going to do that all the way around. And then I'm just going to meet you once you reach the end here, because I'm going to show you how I'm just going to dip down a little bit to create that little extra edging. Alrighty, I just have one more little stitch I want to find. Insert my hook just to close up that gap there. Come across here. And I've gone all the way around. Now, if you wanted to, just going to pull that up. This looks just as cute. I know on camera this looks like this is a super long foot, but I promise you, just that because it's narrow, it looks really long. It fits me no problem. you can totally leave it like this and it looks just as cute. I'm going to add a little extra embellishment going down the center, just that little seam area where we sewed up that middle part. So I'm just going to try and find a couple little loops along here. Just insert anywhere that you can kind of fit your hook through and just pull up through. Okay, and then single crochet. Now I'm just going to do that maybe another 2 times just to kind of bring the fur edging down a little bit. I'm going to find the next spot. Then you just kind of gauge how you like it. I think I'm going to go down 1 more. And what I'm going to do in this last one is I'm actually just going to do a little puff stitch. So I just pulled up a loop. Now I'm going to yarn over, insert, pull up another, yarn over, insert, and pull up 1 more. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull through all of those loops. And so see, I don't know if you can tell too much on camera. It just creates like a little bit of a bunched stitch. And that creates kind of like a little bit of a pom-pom effect. So you have something that looks like that. And then I'm just going to kind of compare it to my other one next to it. Lengthwise, I'm pretty happy with that. So what I'm going to do to end off is I'm going to close this off with another single crochet, actually a slip stitch, I should say, into another little area here. And that just kind of holds down the puff stitch. Just like that. So see how it's subtle? And now I'm just going to snip my fur and then pull that up. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring that into the inside. Just going to use my hook to just feed this through to the inside. Just like that. And then I will weave that in afterwards. And there you go. See how cute that looks with the little embellishment? I love that. So now you've got 2 slippers complete. So I've created the one. You would then go and do the same thing for the second one. What I would recommend is actually working your squares first, like do 1 square, then do a second square, then go and sew them up together. That way you can kind of compare each other's sizing as you go along. Again, this is not like a perfect science. It's not machine made, so there's going to be some imperfections, but you know, you just want to be able to kind of compare notes as you go along. So that's what I would recommend you doing. And then afterwards, I would go ahead and do the fur, and then you can embellish it as you like. So there you have it, guys. The super easy crochet slipper set. This is going to make for a great gift. It doesn't take very long, as you can see. Again, it's just making a couple of rectangles and you're good to go. So if you have any questions at all regarding the crunch stitch, how to put together your slipper, or colors or yarn, just drop me a comment in the comment box down below. And as always, you know you can reach me directly by emailing me at info@crochetcrafty.com, and come and visit me over on crochetcrafty.com. There's a lot of stuff going on there. Make sure to subscribe to my monthly newsletter, because I give away a free written pattern every single month as my gift to you for coming along. And of course, you can always find me on all the socials on Facebook and Instagram. And by the way, send me a pic on Instagram, tag me, and let me know what colors you are going to use for your slippers. So other than that, thanks for coming along. Happy holidays, happy crocheting. Take good care of yourselves, and I will see you guys in the next session. Bye-bye.